Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final stream of day one of Mini Extravaganza 2023. I'm Director of Product Development, Will Schick. So happy you could close out the day with me with a little bit of hobbying. Dallas has been having all the fun painting. I've been doing all the boring talking. It's time for me to get some paint on some miniatures. And what better way to do it than to show off the upcoming and fantastically exciting Fear and Dead Men pack for Star Wars Shatterpoint, which features Darth Vader, the Emperor's servant, and Stormtroopers aplenty. With that said, let's jump on in because we only get an hour before we close out the day and start again tomorrow. That's it. That's all summer's given me. So let's dive right in and get it going. I'll explain a little bit of what I've got going on here. Should I turn on this light? I think I should. Okay. So I have my Vader. You're going to notice that I did a little pre-work because I only get an hour. On my 90-minute ones that I'm going to get the next couple of days, we're going to do the airbrushing live on camera. But here I just prepped him with the airbrush. So the easiest thing here is that, I'm going to get the schmutz off him. I took Pro Acryl Coal Black. I took Blue Black. I took another blue that I don't remember now, dark blue maybe, and the Blue White. And I just built up a gradient using the airbrush on his cloak. So we started with the darkest, and we moved our way up to the top. We did that on the undercoat as well. I did it for the armor parts as in addition. So his helmet, his like little collar, his armored collar thing, his boots, his shin guards, all of that. Then I grabbed dark neutral gray, I think is the color. I did all of the parts for his bodysuit basically because I want these to be a little different. I put those in. My airbrushing got a little bit away from me, so I'm going to have to like redarken that up with the appropriate colors, which should only take a few seconds. So let's do that now. And the reason that I did all this is because what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start using oil washes to do a lot of, schmutz is definitely a technical term. We're going to use oil washes today to knock in all of our all the work for us. So we're gonna go really fast using mixed mediums here and kind of speed paint our way through. And I'm going to show you how you can use these amazing tools to help kind of speed up your painting process, but also get really, really great results. And I'm just going to knock in this little chest box again really quick because again, as I was doing it, I wasn't being too careful because I was a bit in a rush. Everything last minute, you know. And we knocked it out. And then you see that I, in my rush, made a little mistake here, but I'm just going to quickly smooth that out. And the oils are going to mask up a lot of this. But the goal is to get a really nice looking gradient. And then with the oil wash, we're going to apply that really thick. We're going to be able to reduce that in the way that we want. We're going to paint by subtraction. And at that point, we're going to be good to go. Now, in addition to doing Vader, and this is part of the reason I had to cheat a little bit and do some prep, we're also going to paint some Stormtroopers. So I'm going to show you how to tackle white. This is not going to be the first time that I tackle white, so I thought I'd do something a little different this time. Normally when I do my whites, I like to do cool whites, so especially on clone, like Republic clones and stuff. You'll notice they always go to the cool side, so a bit more blue grays, just colder tones in general. This time around, because I always think of Stormtroopers as being a little dirty and you think of them on Tatooine and having browns and natural like warm colors to them, I went with warms. So I used ivory and bright ivory as kind of like my layers up, and then I used a little titanium white. So this guy has been airbrushed with my layers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an oil wash, and by the time we're done with the oil wash, we're going to look like this. So you can see now how we've added a lot of shade and tonality to that white. It looks a little more bone than I would prefer, but we're going to fix that by adding in a lot of highlights and stuff. But this is after the oil wash and the removal application. So I have both little Stormtrooper guys here. This guy unfortunately fell, so his foot broke, so I got to fix him. You'll see his foot's like broken right there. It's very sad for him, but we'll get him fixed up, and it'll be fine. So I'm going to show you how I went from this step, boop, to this step. And then I'm going to show you what you do from here, or what I would do from here in order to finish the miniature. And hopefully we'll get that done. And then we're also going to do a Vader using a similar practice, but of course we're going to be doing blacks. So with that said, let's get our oil washes ready to go and on to Vader. So I don't know if this is on camera. We can move this one here. Hopefully that's close. I have I have indigo, I have Mars black, I have burnt sienna, and I have, what color is that one? I always forget this one. Yellow ochre. I'm going to mix my Stormtrooper shade using a bit of burnt sienna and some yellow ochre. And we want this to be kind of like 50-50-ish. A bit more yellow and stuff to it. We'll kind of call that good. I think that's close enough. It's not going to be a perfect match to what I did before, but that's all right. Everything's got a different tonal shift to it. Not a big deal. And then for Vader, we're going to do Mars Black by itself for the undersuit. And then we're going to do a lot of indigo and a little bit of Mars Black for the cloth and all of the armor bits and stuff like that. And so this is hopefully going to create a couple of different chromatic black colors that are going to work well with our undertones. And they're going to add a lot of visual interest to our Vader that doesn't just make him look flat black. He's going to look kind of interesting. And it's going to be captivating to the eye. So I'm just going to start adding a bunch of white spirits, mineral spirits, depending on where you live, to make some nice oil washes. And we're just going to start mixing those up. I totally shouldn't have used that brush. That's all right. We'll just do it again. It's the end of the day. It's been a long day. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We have so many brushes here. I'm going to grab a different brush. Important bit when using oil washes, because now we're just a cartoon character. Make sure that you always use a different brush for different colors because they're pretty difficult to clean. All right, this is fine though. So we're just going to mix that in. Like what you're looking for out of your oil wash is different based on what you're trying to do. The heavier, the less mineral spirits basically, the more staining power it will have. I don't want a ton of stain to this one because I'm working over white, so even a little bit's going to have a lot of effect. And then for the black, which we can use this brush, because it's mostly black, we'll mix up our blue. And you can test it on the sides of the palette just to see how it like reacts. And maybe you need a little bit more white spirits, maybe you need a little less. But this is very much like a play it by ear, kind of just figure out what you're looking for and where you're going, and you can always add more. One of the things I like to do as I play around with it is I'll make my initial mix, and then I will go back to my white spirits and maybe add a bit more in a different spot. And then that gives me a lot of control to like mix up different amounts or different kind of dilutions. That's the word I want, dilutions. I can also see here that this is still pretty blue, so I might grab a bit more of this black and throw that in there just to make sure that we get a nice dark to the cape. But one of the really cool things about working with oils is that we have a lot of control to mix them onto the stuff. So, all right. So with that said, we're going to start, and I'm going to grab my black here. And I'm just going to start putting it onto our undersuit. And you can see how, because I've got a lot of white spirits and not a lot of paint, how it just kind of runs perfectly into those cracks, really darkening them up. Now I could go heavier if I wanted to, because I kind of want to stain the top of the grays as well. So I may go back and add a little bit more into it. But we're just going to play and see where this takes us for right now. And it doesn't take a lot of work to apply this, so it's just going to kind of like ploop right in there. I'm going to be careful around the chest area if I want it, but again, one of the great things about working with oil paints in general is you can always clean them off. So if you wind up in a situation that you just don't like, or it doesn't look right to you, you know, a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of white spirits, and you're going to be able to take all of it right off. And this is why I've really fallen in love with this style of painting, is that it's quicker, obviously, but also you just have so much more control than you do with an acrylic wash. An acrylic wash, you kind of put it on. If you put it on too heavy, it can be really hard to fix. If you put it on too light, then you kind of have to like mess around with it. So it just takes a lot more work to be able to effectively use. Whereas working with oil paints, especially like oil washes, you have complete control over them. So how long you leave them on will determine how much they stain. So you can control basically how much color they add to the miniature. You can remove them. You can go right in with other oil paints and kind of blend directly on the miniature itself. The amount of opportunity and options you have to really knock things out is incredible. And you know, one of the things that people always talk about, or a question that always gets asked, and I've been pretty interested in this myself, so I've been listening to a lot of different thought processes on this, is do you have to matte seal before you go over acrylics? The answer is no. Acrylics have no chemical reaction to white spirits. They don't affect them at all. So you don't have to, if you don't want to, seal the miniature. Now, if you're doing pin washes and stuff, sealing the miniature can help the oil wash flow a lot easier and better. So there's a consideration to make there. Like, do you want to have like the tap and then it just runs in the cracks? Having a matte sealant over there for the paint to flow, because it will basically, the sealant will cover up all the tooth of the acrylics, is an option. That said, at the microscopic level, right, these paints are still going to interact. So the oils are going to fall into those little microscopic holes in the acrylics. They're going to fill well. So by not sealing each layer between the paints, you can actually achieve really cool blending effects that you don't get if you seal them. And that's kind of the whole, you know, how true is it? How real is that? I don't know. Not a chemist. I'm not a professional artist. I try to learn from really great professional artists and folks who do this, you know, way more than I do. And in my own personal experimentation, I found that I really love the way that the two mediums interact with each other when I don't seal them. I think the end result and the way that you can play with them and get these different results is fantastic. So that's what I do. I don't typically use the sealer. I'll seal them at the very end after everything's dry. But even as we get to the next step on this and we start doing our acrylics after we clean it up, I'm not going to worry about sealing it, right? I'm just going to go right in and I'm going to start working, and those paint medias are going to work perfectly fine together, and I'm going to use that to my advantage. So again, you know, the options and opportunity you have are really great, and being willing to explore that and try different things and see what works for you is the most important bit, and it's really the fun of the hobby, right? Dallas and Tony just did a great conversation about the worthy, and you know, improving one's painting skill and talents and getting to a point to where you might, you know, maybe you want to earn a bronze or a silver or a gold. As much as I love seeing the entries and appreciate the artistry behind that, bunk that, man. I'm not here for that. I'm here to just have some fun and put paint on miniatures. And the thing that's fun for me is experimentation and messing around with different ways and seeing success and learning new things. So I've been working on my airbrushing skills a lot, and that's been really fun. And then working in this new like mixed media style that I've kind of been doing a lot of exploration about and learning about on YouTube and stuff like that has been a blast, and I've loved the results that have come out of it. And I know that, you know, what I'm doing is not clean enough to really go into the worthy, but that's not my goal, right? My goal here is to just have a great time, make my own art, and enjoy it, right? Thankfully, I don't have to try to make my living off of painting miniatures, or otherwise I'd probably be in trouble. Because I don't know if I have the patience for it, or the artistic eye, but when it comes to like making miniatures that make me flippin' happy and look amazing on my tabletop so I can play with my friends and family and other folks when I get the opportunity to play outside the house, I get to do that, and I get to tell awesome stories with stuff that I have. And that is good enough for me. Okay, so this is kind of where we're at. I'm pretty happy with where this is going. I think I might need to darken up a little bit of a few more areas, so I'm going to grab some more of this Mars Black. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the mixing power of oils. And I've decided that my Midnight Black or my Indigo on my blue-black areas is not strong enough. So I'm just going to go back in, and I'm going to hit it with more Mars Black. And we're just going to let those oil washes kind of like blend on the Mini. And you're like, oh, oh, this is a mess. Now, if you're doing with those acrylic washes, this miniature would be done. And I'd be like, well, we'll just start over, you know? Just go take a seat, grab some coffee, maybe a stiff drink at this point. Think about what you've done and start again. But because we're working with oil washes, you know, I could effectively slop paint all over this guy, just make him a mess. And again, with a little bit of diligence and work, I can go back in and clean it all up. I can make it all better. And honestly, I'll even get some really cool looking stains out of the whole deal. So this is one of those really cool things. And when it comes to like building confidence in your painting and learning how to do stuff, it can be a phenomenal aid. It can really make a huge difference in everything that you're doing. I'm gonna get the back behind his super billow cape because, you know, that's important. All right, we're gonna leave this, I think, right here because I'm pretty happy with it. And then we're gonna move on to our Stormtrooper. We won't call him Norman, though. And then we're going to give this about 15 minutes to set up. Nope, the Stormtroopers have different poses. One is like kind of taking the wide stance, and one is taking like a closer leg stance. I mean, they're both in motion and shooting because Stormtroopers, you know, they have that inexorable like Imperial advance and everything like that. All right, we're going to pull this guy off. We're going to move over to our Stormtrooper Sergeant. We're going to learn a lesson from last time. I'm going to put that brush over here. We're going to grab this brush here. And we're just going to start laying in our oil wash. Now you'll notice that this one's a lot thinner, and that's what I want because, again, this white is going to stain like crazy because it's white. And it's just going to absorb that color more. So one of the things that you can do before this step is you can go ahead and just paint in all the other details. So normally what I do is instead of starting right here, I would do all the black undersuiting and stuff first. And I do that just like I painted my Vader, right? I just go in with some blues and some blue blacks and little chromatic blacks and everything. And then you can just slop in all of your oil wash on top of them, and it'll give them that nice stain as well. I didn't do that here partially because I wanted to really just emphasize what was happening on the armor, and also because I didn't necessarily know, without some experimentation, how I would feel about the more like yellow brown wash over those darker areas. So I'm playing it safe here. I'm just going to go back in and kind of paint those up normal, but there you go. So at this point, we have him kind of like layered in. Again, we're being a lot lighter on this because this is going to be really, really potent. And I still want the Stormtrooper to be white. I just want him to be more on that warm side. So we're kind of going that way. And I think here we're pretty good. So that was pretty quick. While we give these fine folks a chance to dry, let's go ahead. We'll shift gears a little bit. And we'll dive in and start painting this Stormtrooper here. So again, right, this is after the cleaning process. Everything's good to go. I have not sealed him at all. I'm just going to dive in and start doing, we're just going to go in and we're going to start painting in all of the areas that we want to paint. So we're just going to get in that suit. And we'll let this be kind of thin, and we can go back in and do a couple of extra steps if we want to. Now, it's dealer's choice when you get to this stage as to whether or not you want to use acrylics or you want to use, I'm just going to mix, I don't even know what Dallas has on this palette. This was his palette from his Geonosian one. If you watch that, that's what we're working with. I was like, hey, put out a bunch of paints for me. I'm just going to stick with that. But it is really your choice as to whether you finish the miniature with acrylics or with oils. And both are viable options. One of the nice things about utilizing oils after the oil wash is that the miniature will be nice and wet. So if you've ever been a fan of Bob Ross, and who hasn't, very similar to the techniques that he showed there, right? So you're painting wet on wet, which means it's really easy to do like smooth blends. It doesn't take a whole lot of oil paint to get good effects. And you still have all of the benefits of oils, which is like, it's super easy to erase mistakes, to blend things out, to get natural gradations and variants on the colors and all of that stuff. So you can go that route, but if you just are like, I don't really feel like messing with oil paints or learning those techniques, because it is a very different kind of style of painting, you don't have to. You can just do what I'm doing and go right back in with acrylics and paint it like you would anything else. But you've kind of sped up the stages because you've done, all of the work. And like I mentioned, normally what I would do is I would do all of this underpainting. So we'd do all the suit stuff and everything first, use the oil washes as kind of the last step or the middle step, and then we would just be doing finishing touches on these guys. So we'd be doing our highlights, maybe a little bit of dark lining depending on where we needed to clean things up, reclaiming a mid-tone or two if we felt the need to, but it makes the process so fast because that wash step, and you can use different color washes for different areas. I believe when we get to Empire's Elite, Empire's Elite, that I'll be doing tomorrow, that sounds right. I'm going to show you this whole process from start to finish. So I'm going to show you how I airbrush. I'm going to show you how I do the oil wash step, and then we're going to finish the miniatures using acrylics, and by the end of it, you'll see like the whole process going forward, and you'll probably get to see something exciting if you're happen to be a fan of Legion or just miniatures in general. We got a little surprise in store for you, so you should tune into that one. It'll get you prepped for the Legion roadmap on Saturday. But again, you can approach this stuff and handle it any way you want. Because I had so much to prep for Mini-Strab, but I also had all of my normal duties. I kind of just did what would cover the techniques for where we're at. And this is kind of where we wound up. So we're just going to paint in all this guy's undersuit stuff. And honestly, I might go back in and use my oil washes that I have mixed up to just finish that black undersuit and call it good. But we'll see where we get to. Summer, what are you doing? Oh, she's moving the camera. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. How dare I? How dare I get that wrong? Do we think we'll hear any sweet news about the rules for this pack? Well, I am not authorized to say anything about such things, but if I were a betting man, and boy am I, there are 3 Shatterpoint. We've got a very cool roadmap happening tomorrow. If you caught the roadmap today, you know that one of the things we love to do at roadmaps is spoil some sweet, sweet rules action, in addition to talking about the whole process of how things got sculpted, how the art got made, all that good stuff. So there's a good chance you might see some rules coming out for maybe these fine Stormtroopers at the roadmap. And then we've got a really awesome panel where we're going to be discussing how characters get created for Star Wars Shatterpoint. So we're going to dive into the whole process, how we determine which characters we're looking at doing, how we generate the initial designs, how we do all of the rules development and the play testing. Hint, hint, it requires a lot of games to be played by a lot of people and a lot of feedback to be considered. But we're going to walk through a bunch of that. So, again, I'd say dollars to donuts if you're interested in some rules content, some sweet, sick spoilers, as it were. I could. Sweet, sick spoilers. Look, this is just the 90s kid me coming out. I grew up in an era of extreme Mountain Dew and Funyuns, man. I drank a lot of Surge as a kid. There's no doubt. I don't know why my mother had no problem with that. I do. It was the 90s and no one cared. Like the amount of sugar that I consumed as a child, I'm probably still on that high. There's zero question. Like this right now, it's just a Friday night sleepover from 1996 coming right back. Just being like, yeah, look at this guy. Doesn't it? Doesn't it just? You love it. Don't pretend like you don't, Summer. You could have left a long time ago. There's a Tony Konachek over there. You're still sitting at the board. Yeah, we caught you out, girl. We caught you out. All right. I need to stop futzing with this guy for a little bit because I think we're at a moment where, boop, it's time to start cleaning these. Okay. So again, 15, it really depends on how, oh, Jolt? No, thank you. I'm not a madman. So it really depends how strong you want the stain, right? The longer you kind of leave the paint on, the stronger the staining effect. Another thing that will affect the staining effect is the quality of the oil paints you use. So you can do this technique with like student grade paints, but your staining effects won't be as strong. You can do this technique, and it works probably best with the like mid-range acrylics, so like the Wintons and things like that. If you're using the artist grade paints, which have the highest value of pigment, they're going to stain really, really well. So you're just going to want to be aware of that, and you're going to want to kind of test. And, again, one of the great things about this whole process is that if you kind of go too far and make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can always fix it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go in with a dry makeup sponge, and we're going to start rubbing off the paint. And you start this way just to kind of get an idea of how much the stain, like how much of the paint has stained the surface. If you use the same brush or the same like stroke motion, so for example, if we assume that the light is coming up from here, if you clean and make sure that your cleaning strokes are always in the same direction, you can actually get some really nice and convincing highlights, because you'll see here, the more I use the sponge, the more oil paint winds up on the sponge, right? So if I go from top to bottom, it means that I'll clean the most amount of paint off the top, but as I get down to the bottom, if I don't change or refresh my sponge, I'm going to actually be blending more of that paint on there. So the effect is going to be stronger down low. Now, for the Stormtrooper, that's not really my goal because he's not supposed to be bone colored, he's supposed to be white. So in that case, I'd be like, well, I kind of feel like my sponge has done its work. It's time to call in the big guns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift to a Q-tip. I'm going to get that Q-tip coated with some white mineral spirit. Maybe. Oh, come back, mineral spirits. I need more. You evaporate so fast. All right. So I'm just going to simply get my Q-tip loaded with some mineral spirits. And then what I do is I'm going to start putting that mineral spirit and wiping with that. And again, the oil is going to react to the mineral spirits, and it's going to strip away most of that paint. So this is how, if you want to do a total reset, you can do that. And then I can go in with my clean side of my Q-tip. And if I work those areas, you'll see that I can just start pulling that paint completely off. Now it will always, for the most part, because I'm not going to work it to death, it's going to leave a little bit of that color behind. But the more that I do this, the more color I'm going to remove. And this is probably going to take a few Q-tips. So this is the part where you're painting by subtraction, right? Now because it's harder to get into the cracks and the crevices, like this leg is a really great example. So you see how I'm working that with the mineral spirit side? We're back to the color that we started at. But where the Q-tip can't get to very easily in those, in those natural areas that would be shaded, we've got a beautiful shade going on. The one thing you do want to be careful about is, and I think this is part of why people kind of worry about the mineral spirit stripping the acrylic paint, is that if you work the paint too hard, right, if you scratch or put too much pressure on it, you can just scrape the paint off. It's not the mineral spirit doing it, it's literally the Q-tip or the instrument that you're using to pull that paint off. So you do have to be careful about, you know, how hard you work the area, how much pressure you're using, and it's just something to be aware of. And that's obviously if you're not sealing the miniature. But even if you seal the miniature, if you work an area hard enough, you're going to scrape off the paint, just like if you put your nail to it and scrape the paint right off. So we're just going to go back in and do this. We're going to clean this area up. I'm going to pull some more of this off here. Some more of this off here. And again, I'm mostly just thinking about, okay, like where was my light be? Where do I want a little bit more like light? Because part of this, like, I'm not going to clean the whole thing, right? I want some of that stain to still be there. Because my next step on this guy, like I did with the others, is to go back through with the airbrush and to paint in the white. And this is part of the reason why I didn't get to the undersuits and stuff is, switch out to a new Q-tip. The tiny hairs really aren't a problem because you can just pluck them right off, especially at this stage. So it doesn't really bother me too much. But if you don't want the tiny hairs, they do make the Q-tips, like the little makeup Q-tips that have the soft sponge exterior, and you can use those. I always feel a little like bad using a bunch of those though, because they are typically made of a less biodegradable material, let's put it that way. So I'm willing to pick off some hairs from my finished things if I need to. Okay, I'm going to stop there on that guy, but you can see how we're getting closer to that color. Now, like I said, what I did is then I took the airbrush and I went back over with my whites, my bright ivory, and I started knocking that stuff in. And we'll see if we get to that point, but then I'm going to have Summer or Tony turn that on. So let's go to Vader. He's sat the longest, so he's had a lot of time to kind of stain in, and that's good because we started from a very, very bright color. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to start wiping away and clean off some of that color. So you can see back here how where we had those really like not black, those very blue-white highlights, because of the stain of the oil wash, we're right back to a very natural like blue-black. So we have a really nice chromatic black. And we can kind of like knock this stuff in. Again, working from kind of top to bottom. We're going to have more color as we work our way down. And one of the things that works out really well is typically the places that you can't reach as easy are the places that would be most in shadow. So the inability to clean like behind here and everything just kind of makes sense from a color standpoint because that's obviously where you'd have the most color. But we can come in with this dry Q-tip, cotton swab, and you start working it in. You can go to the helmet, maybe just work a bit more off here. And this is all based on, again, kind of your rough feeling, but you're painting by subtraction now. So we're just removing paint as we feel makes sense. And if we want to get even more color off, like let's say we want to go to these edges, we can grab our mineral spirits, come in, kind of hit those areas, and pull even more of our wash off. So you can see here how now we've almost gone completely back to where we started with that base coat or that underpainting. So it just really comes down to how you want. And the other cool thing is if you take that dry Q-tip again, you can kind of blend out. It's almost like painting with the wash again because you're pulling wash from one area and you can move it to the other. So you can do really soft gradients. You can do all these effects. just like you would if you were actually painting on the miniature, but instead we're just doing this with our oil wash. So there's a lot of really great stuff that you can make happen with these things. And then like there's a fuzzy there, we just pull the fuzzy off. No problemo. So let's say that on this Vader here, we're just going to go off book now, because why not? On this Vader here, we're going to go in and we're going to use our oil paints to paint him. So, slide that out of the way. Get these non-oil brush paints out of the way. Come back over here. I'm going to grab a paint that I didn't think I was going to have to grab. I'm going to grab some Brilliant Yellow Pale and plop that out. Brilliant Yellow Pale makes a fantastic highlight for these types of blacks. I'm also going to grab some, yes, titanium white. And I'm going to grab a little brush. I'm going to grab another blending brush. Not that one. You'll be fine. Maybe. Okay.
Schick, do you mind tilting your palette around a little bit to catch different lights? Because that yellow pale is looking no different to the white right now on camera.
Well, I don't know. Okay, you want to do this like that? Does that help? Now I'm just getting
you're
stuff
getting little kicks of it. Okay, I mean, maybe it's just, yeah, I can't see from here, so are they just
well,
the same?
you come over here, Tony, and I'll show you. All right. We're just going to throw in a little bit of our stuff. And all right, with this, you believe me now?
I do, yes.
All right, thank you, Tony. I'm glad that you've approved. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start highlighting kind of my hard edges here. Uh-oh, it's a Dallas Kemp. What can I do for you, Dallas Kemp?
Jeremy is very upset. He bought you makeup sponges and you're using a Q-tip and you're really mad that you had a Q-tip.
I used the makeup sponges, but there's parts where you have to use the Q-tip.
You were mad last time you had Q-tips. You used the makeup sponges Jeremy bought you.
I used the makeup sponges.
He's upstairs crying.
You're not even watching. I used the makeup sponges. My gosh.
He's very upset.
My dear Anakin. My dear Anakin. It'd be like, what did you... It'd be Padme, like, you know, sitting at home after a hard day at the office. What did you do today, Anakin? He'd be like, I was denied a seat on the council and it made me mad. And she'd be like, how are we going to pay the rent now? He already put the down payment on for the pool and the hot tub. Just in trouble. All right, so you'll notice that I'm just like marking in all of these like spots. And I'm not really worrying about blending them. That's because I got a long time where I can do this and not have to worry about blending them out because they're oil paints, so they're not going to dry super fast. So we can kind of just play around with it, work it out. Oh my gosh, everyone with these Q-tips and makeup sponges and everything else, it's a mixed media process, people. You can use whatever you want. And I'm using the best tool for the job. Leave me be. Let's come in here and kind of knock in this color like that. That. Get a bit more like that. I really want to have that glow there. His little weird dome helmet always gets me in terms of how you want it to be kind of blended out. Alright, and then we want to get this box here. So we'll come in with this box. And I don't know what this little knobbies are, but we'll do this with them. There won't be too much highlight down here, but I'm going to get a little bit. And then we'll do a little bit on this. More than I wanted, but whatever. Okay, now you can already see how the Brilliant Yellow Pale, hopefully, is just naturally blending into the oil paint that's already on my Vader here. Because as it goes on the Mini, which maybe it's hard to tell from the paint palette cam, as Tony mentioned, but the Brilliant Yellow Pale is like, it's a really pale yellow, like a super pale yellow. So obviously, as I work this onto the miniature, it's not looking like a yellow. It looks like a nice little blue, like a very light blue highlight. And that's because already, even without any extra work, that paint is mixing with that thin layer of wash. But we can make that even better by blending it out. And this is a point where like a lot of your artistic style comes in. So do you want to try to have smooth blends? Do you want to do like textury blends? How do you want that final miniature to look? And I've seen folks do everything, right? Everyone's got kind of their own style and their own look, but you can really make the effect whatever you want. So you can do like little scratches and scritches and make it all like blend out. You can add texture, you know, all that good stuff. Add this here, that there, this here. Especially on that boot, you can kind of see how it just like works out. Put in a little bit of color there. Keep that pretty black. Put in that there. Coming over here. And I didn't do the metallic in there, but whatever. I can always go back in and add the little metal bits. Got too heavy on his little knob, on his little, I don't know, mask knob, whatever that is. But we can fix that here in a second. Okay, so we've kind of sketched in. There's another fuzzy. Whoop. Kind of sketched in everything that we want with that Brilliant Yellow Pale. I'm going to grab a little bit of black, a little bit of white. I'm just going to make a really light gray because I want a different-ish highlight for this little ribbed part of the suit. Again, I'm just going to kind of like figure out where I want my little zings of highlights. And as I do that, we'll come back in and we'll start blending the stuff out. And once again, right, if I was using acrylics, all of these little super strong highlights that look a little chunky and probably not perfect, we'd be done. They'd be there forever and we'd have to fix it. But we're not working with acrylics right now, we're working with our oils. And that means that we have all kinds of freedom and time to work things in and come back and figure it out. Scritches are definitely pointier at the ends, I think. Yes. Yes. Let's come over here. Work in these colors here. Whoop, whoop. Like that. Here like that. So also just letting the sculpt work for you as well, right? Like those ridges are so nicely sculpted by Marco and his team and the engineers and everything that it doesn't take a lot of work to hit those high points, make those ridges work. Just get that little element of like scritch. Come here, Fuzzy. Whoop. Knock that in, get that going. Okay. At this point, I think we can go in with our blending brush and kind of start blending some of this out. I'm pretty happy with that. So, we're just going to go in with a clean, dry brush, and we're going to tap. And this is my favorite part of oils, is scumbling. It's called scumble, Tony. I remembered it this time. You just take that clean, dry brush, and you come in, and you just kind of tap on the edge, and it just blends itself right out, and it looks beautiful. I don't know why. It's like magic. It makes me feel so good. The more you tap, obviously, the more you can blend it out. But it is just letting the oils do their magic on the canvas like they want to do. And let's say we get to something like this where maybe we need a little bit more dark. We can always come back in and reestablish that or clean it up. Now, the more you scumble, the more paint you're going to pick up on your brush, which means that, again, if you start from the top and work your way to the bottom, your bottom blends are going to be darker than your top blends because you're going to pick up a lot more of that dark paint that you're like blending together. So top to bottom really helps out. So like, you know, here we've got this really ugly smooge on his helmet for his thing. And if we just come in with this, we just touch. And when you work with oils, you want to whisper to it. You want to speak sweet nothings to it. It just happens. It's such a light that you just want to give it a little touch.
Well, it's common knowledge that if you speak too loudly around oil paints, you'll bruise them.
Exactly, you will. They're very delicate. So you're just like, just a whisper, just 2 hairs and some hair right there. Blend it out, blend it out. You don't want to scare it. You just want to come in. And, you know, maybe you don't like that there, so we can just come in really aggressively and we can pretty much make it just go away. Look at that, just blend it right out. Oh, go away. Highlight I didn't want, bam! See, now I've bruised it and it's gone. That's how it works. So I will come over here. This was a pretty sloppy mess, but hey, we'll just kind of come in, do our scumbling. And again, we can always come back in with a darker color and work it away. Here I made a little mistake, but I can totally just make that go away just by tapping. And again, all I'm doing, I'm not even, with the exception of where I want to erase a highlight necessarily, I'm not even really pushing that hard. Like I'm just tapping away. So come over to this cape. Maybe we'll just scumble it out here. And we can just make it fade in. By kind of like going in and working it out. And if we want it darker, maybe we think that we still need to go a bit further in there, we can do that. The big thing with your scumbling or your blending in general, and you don't have to scumble, you can actually just do a two-brush, like a classic two-brush blend. And it works just as well, right? Just have your clean brush. So for example, maybe I say, okay, well, I don't like where this section ended up. So I'm just gonna come in, I'm gonna work in that. I'm gonna grab my other brush, and I'm just gonna blend that out. And I can blend those two colors together. And come over here with that brush that's still got some paint on it and blend some darkness. Some darkness. Oh, so artsy. In here, right? We can come down here. Maybe our stuff didn't stick quite as well there, so we want to make that. I'm going to get that a bit more intense. So we'll just paint in some of that, and we'll blend back out. And if we feel like our brush is getting a little too heavy with paint, we can either switch brushes. Having a lot of brushes really helps a lot. Or we can just clean the brush on a dry paper towel. The important bit here is to absolutely never, never, never take your blending brush and put it into the mineral spirit. Because once you do that, your brush is just going to ruin everything, unless it's super dry. So typically, until you've decided that you're done with that brush for kind of the session, is my rule. Don't clean it, right? If you're going to go back to it, then you shouldn't use the spirits on it to clean it out. If you're done with it, and you think you're done with it for a while or the whole session or whatever, then you can go in and be like, okay, I'm going to put the spirits on it, I'm going to call it good. So I want to get some more of this Mars black into those folds. So now I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to work in some of that color there, work it in over here. And we'll get some in right here, right? So we've got these really heavy black lines now. I had a little bit too much thinner in it, but we'll figure it out. We'll fix it. And you'd be like, oh, those aren't blended at all. They just look like gross, harsh black lines. And I'd be like, that's true. They do. But thanks to the power of oils, I can just blend them out. Blend them out. You just got to work them a little bit. You can come back in with your highlight colors. If you mix up your highlight colors, you can do all that stuff. So again, you just have all this time to work and play and do everything. And this whole process kind of went off track from where we were going. But, I had the oil paints in front of me, and I was just kind of like, let's show how you can work from that oil wash into oils for highlights. And now what I'm doing is, because I have all this time with the oils, I'm going back and I'm saying, well, I didn't really like how this turned out. So let me fix that. I've got this blend here. Let me come in and I'll just scumble it back down. Now we have this really nice, smooth gradient. And it looks beautiful, and I love it. I'm so happy with it. I want to darken up the rim around the helmet, so I'm going to come in and do that. Maybe I'll grab a little bit of black here, and I'll say, whoop, and I'll just put in a line, right? Just put in a really sharp, gross line. Oh, it's ugly. It's ugly, Tony. I hate it, but I'm not done with it, right? I can just come in, blend it away. Up and down, soften it up, pull it, and work it. And all of a sudden we went from a really sharp, gross black line to a nice, smooth little blend. Look at it. Look at it, Tony. You can't even see the black line anymore. It's just shadow. It's just the dark side's cousin, shadow. I don't know. It's been a long day. It's going to be a longer day tomorrow. I'm excited. We got so much good stuff going on. Come back in here. Do that. So again, right, I can spend the next 2-3 hours doing this stuff. And everything's great and all good. And we got to get down here. So let's blend out. Shoop. Let's blend out this area here. Blend out this area here. Work that down. Blend out the boot. Blend out this area here. Here. like blending back in. All right, I'm pretty happy with where this is looking right now, so we can blend that down a little bit. Maybe blend that down a little bit. And the harder, the more that you blend an area, the more you work an area, the more it's going to blend in until you actually just erase it. So you can do all of that. Yeah, the Shatterpoint roadmap is going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have a good time. Like I said, we've got a couple other really cool Shatterpoint things coming up as well. We're going to have a little bit of a behind the scenes kind of discussion, retrospective, sharing the war stories about getting Shatterpoint into players' hands. So if you probably heard us talk at some point or another about some of the philosophies and the challenges and where we went, where we're going, all that good stuff. We're just going to sit down and kind of talk about the whole process, share some of our favorite memories, some of our insights that we had while developing the game. We're going to talk about some of the things, probably a lot of things that didn't work, some of the things that did work, how we got to the final product, and game rules that we have. And then from there, we're also going to be doing that character, like developing characters for Shatterpoint. That one's going to be really fun. We're going to talk all about the philosophies and how we approach things and how we translate these iconic characters from the screen into the game, what we're looking for as we do that and everything else. So, all right, what's Vader without his saber? So we better do that saber, Tony. We got 2 minutes. That's plenty of time, right? Why not? I wasn't paying attention to the clock. I was just enjoying the process. So, if nothing else, everyone knows red saber. It's fine. Let's go ahead. At 8? No, 7:30. This one's only an hour. Okay, let's just come in here with this orange because I like my red sabers to be more orange than red. Whoop, whoop. So, just gonna knock in this. And then, because we're kind of on a little bit of a blending tear, we'll just go ahead and grab a little bit of this red. And we'll just wet blend into that orange. That's nice and juicy from that wet palette. Ooh, goodness. There we go. A little bit more orange. Do some of that orange interior lighting on the blade. So I typically pick both sides of the blade, and I just go in and add a little bit of inner light. And like I said, on my Sith red sabers, I like to use orange instead of white, but you can use white as well. But I think the orange just helps the red read a little bit better. There's that. And then we just have to do some buttons and the boxes, but I don't have reference in front of me, and I'll screw up the button colors, and then Simone Elliott will yell at me, and I will weep, because it's been a long day. And are we happy? I think we're pretty happy. And it's 7:31, so it is time to say goodbye to one and all. So this is where we got on our Vader. Here's where we're looking on our Stormtroopers. Boop. So you can see how that's drying out. And again, what we do is we go over and we just add some more white, and that would eventually lead us to this kind of white value here, which is looking pretty good, especially you start adding that contrasting in black. We'd finish the rest of the stuff here. We got a long way to go on that guy, but he's kind of started. He was a good little example. And then we have our Vader, who we used a similar technique on, started with airbrushing, did some oil washes, went in there with more oils, started doing all the highlights and everything. He's looking very sinister and shiny. He's got a great looking black, and we just have to do some buttons and everything else, and he'll be good to go. And ready for his debut on the gaming table against one Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. All right, and with that, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks so much for hanging out for the first day of Mini Stravaganza 2023. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Check the schedule for the start time. We're going to be kicking things off with the Shatterpoint roadmap. So if you are a fan of what we were working on here, want to see more of what's coming for that game, get a good view of everything going into next spring, be sure to tune in for that. We have plenty more content, hobby, game related, all of that good stuff coming in the next 2 days. We'll see you on the next one. I've been Will. You've been great. Goodbye and good night.